I had this battle of like, follow my purpose, pay my bills, follow my purpose, pay my bills. All along, God is in the details of everything. Like, we don't need to keep it separate. And that's part of the, like, where the title of my blog came from, because constantly I needed to remind myself that the details are important with everything. If you are seeking purpose, you need God in those details. If you are trying to pay your bills, you need God in those details. If I am trying to make this room functional and beautiful for staff, I need to pay attention to the details. So then, yes.
93, got that beat.
What's going on, family? It's your brother Lawrence here with another episode of Watch God Work. And today I'm excited. We got Baltimore in the building. Yeah, I'm excited to have my sister, our sister, your sister, Miss Anita Williams. What's going on, sis?
Thank you so much for this invitation. I am excited to be here and grateful again for this invitation.
Nah, man, I'm excited. Just for this conversation. I always have to jump out the truck and jump out in front of my biases, right? Because I'm a son of an architect, AutoCAD life, interior design, and so anytime stories that come upon, or I get introduced to people who have a penchant, who have a gifting, who have a disposition towards interior design, I am excited. And that's in many ways kind of our conversation that we connected on. But even beyond that, it's beautiful to see people who are uniquely gifted, who have kind of carved out a way to serve people in their community and serve people. But then even beyond that, all the other things that they carry. And so I always shout out parents, I shout out mothers, I shout out fathers. And you are one who is like, you have interior design, you're an exceptional HR professional. On top of that, you got kids, you got the children, you got husband. And so it's just like, man, I just became so intrigued about your story. And so this is kind of how we're coming into this Pretty Loves Details blog. Shout out, but there's much more obviously that we'll get into. And so I have to begin. Who is Miss Anita Williams?
Great question. I am a mother, a sister, a friend, a designer, yes, an HR professional, but more importantly, God's daughter. I lead everything in my life through my faith first. That's the lens that I've always had. So I'm also your biggest cheerleader. I really, really enjoy bringing other people up and love talking about the word.
This is I appreciate this, like kind of like just the context of where you sit within relationships to people, but obviously most importantly, where you sit and how you see yourself in relation to God. I have to always ask, like, where this desire or where this kind of sense that you love design, you love the details. I remember there was one joint I saw where you kind of had to set up for the homeschooling, and it was so simple, but it looked so fly. And I was just like, yo, man, yo, man, you like, this looks a little fly, got the little setup, got the little color. I was just like, man, but just tell me about the genesis story, even in your life. Where did this inspiration come from? Where did you sense that, you know what, interior design, that's something I care about? How early in your life did you know?
I'll have to say, and I didn't know this. When I'm an artist at heart, I'll say that first. I was professionally trained as a child. All things art. My mom put me in every activity, every school. I went to performing arts school in Baltimore. And so art is like breath to me. It's a part of who I am. So to get to interior design, one thing I noticed as a child, I would always draw pictures of houses in different ways. And they say if you don't know what you want to do as far as your purpose, to kind of look at what you gravitated towards when you were kids. And a lot of kids draw pictures of animals or even their family, and I always drew pictures of houses. So I had this fascination for whatever reason at a young age. Fast forward to, I have to say, high school, always changing my room out, always wanting to have it look differently. Fast forward to college, get to college, undeclared major, have no idea what I want to do. Because I will say this, when it came to interior design, with the type of environment that I grew up in, all Black high school, whenever they had career days, I didn't see examples of our brothers and sisters doing interior design or architecture, so I didn't know. So I had this desire, right? I didn't know how to translate it. So when it came to school, I did totally something different, got my bachelor's in a totally different field, got the opportunity to get my hands on interior design, actually with the employer that I'm with now. They needed a project coordinator. This is how God works. They needed a project coordinator for a commercial full renovation $1 million project. So of course I raised my hand, not knowing what I want to do, right? And it took 4 years, a lot of praying, prayer cards all on my wall about, God, put your hand on this. This is scary. This is frustrating, but I loved it at the end. So long story short, that is where I was like, I need to take this serious. I learned a lot out of that. I don't consider it a loss, even though it was a headache, right? But yeah, that is where it was like, let's take this serious.
This is dope, because I think even in hearing, I think we hear the stories of, I didn't see an example, so I didn't think it was possible, versus, I didn't see an example, and so I was it a pragmatic decision? Because I'm pretty sure, from there's one view to say I didn't have the inspiration, and so I thought it was just maybe a hobby, and so I just said, okay, I got to make a living, versus, you know what, this wasn't even in I actually didn't see someone like us. So it just wasn't in my Like, what really was it that made you kind of go to kind of just a great field, right, that you're in, but just not pursue that? Was it like you did not know about architecture, or you just said, like, it just seems too far off because I don't know anybody who does it?
Wow. So I'll have to get a little deep, but not get too long-winded. So reel me in if I get too long-winded.
All good. Tell the story. I
have to say, honestly, again, I don't know if I mentioned it, but I grew up in the church. To give you a little bit of background of me. So it was, you know what that means. Sundays, I have to be there. Sometimes I'm the liturgist. I'm singing on the choir. I'm doing the dance, playing in the band. I'm doing it all, right? So God has always been first in my life, even at a young age. I had the wrong perception when it came to art-related fields. Not ministry in the church. Even though he gave me this gift, it's not important. Sometimes we tell ourselves that lie, and that's exactly what it is. When you get to spend time with God, you learn the truth that the gifts didn't come from me, it came from him, so it is important. But I had to learn that. And when I learned that, that's when I circled back to it. So I had this interest, right? But I felt like it was so far from God. I was so small-minded in my perspective and limiting what God could do in that season in my youth that I didn't connect, if God gave you the vision, if he gave you the dream, the gift, you can do it. Don't worry about how. So that was really a barrier that I created for myself. Once I got out of my own way, then this embracing that God was waiting for me to do on interior design totally came in, where I was like, yes, let's go. I'll trust you. I want to do this. I love it. It has all the aspects that I love, helping people, projects, design, art. So if you don't take anything out of it, it's really to know that there are times where we might be praying for purpose. And I remember in my 20s thinking, God, what's my purpose? What's my purpose? I knew what my purpose was all along, but I had to put myself aside so that he could tell me that this gift is from me, and that's why you can pursue it. That's what makes it okay.
This is we need to, I don't want speed. It's like you said a lot in this, right? So on one hand, was it just to clarify, was it the view that, you talked about, ministry and growing up in the church. Was it the view that, this just seems too creative and out there, I can't make a living, or this is not really a gift? Could you clarify, what was the issue from because of your upbringing? How did this limit your perspective on this?
So ministry to me in my youth was something in the church.
Got it.
Or youth pastor, or becoming a pastor, or being a deacon, so I had these, so this is, the religious positions, right? I thought if it's not in that type of ministry, then pursuing it's not important. That was what I got wrong.
This makes sense. But so are you saying that you had a call to ministry at that time, or was it an issue? So you said, I am called to minister, but I don't think I could do that. Or were you saying because I had commitments, right? It just didn't seem like something that I should really pour in, because it's not, you still went into, a profession, right? You still went to HR profession doing that. So just tell me how you're categorizing this when you say ministry. You just said, I shouldn't invest in this thing because I have other ministry commitments. Like just talk a bit, because I think it's going to help people, because I think that people have the same challenge that you're talking about.
So that's a great question to break it down even further, because this is what we do, right? We have this idea of having this conversation over here, like, God, what is my purpose? What should I do? And then we have this thing called bills and responsibilities, right? And a lot of times we keep them separate, and we make decisions over here one day, and then we make decisions over there another day. So what I was thinking, which wasn't right, which was, in order to serve, I can only do one or two things. I can be walking and moving and serving in my purpose, but it has to be in ministry, like church related. Or I could do church on Sunday and pay my bills, and the profession doesn't really matter. So I had this battle of follow my purpose, pay my bills, follow my purpose, pay my bills. All along, God is in the details of everything. We don't need to keep it separate. And that's part of where the title of my blog came from, because constantly I needed to remind myself that the details are important with everything. If you are seeking purpose, you need God in those details. If you are trying to pay your bills, you need God in those details. If I am trying to make this room functional and beautiful for staff, I need to pay attention to the details. So that, yes.
This is so dope and deep. I think one, it's the singular, it's the there's multiple dimensions of purpose, right? I think sometimes what limits us is the idea that purpose is singular, Meaning, God has a purpose for the world, a plan for the world. So even if you don't believe in God, you would hear the story about God has a purpose and plan for the world. And part of his fulfillment of that plan was through Jesus coming, right? So I'm just keep bringing everybody along who's listening, who may not, believe in Jesus. And typically, sometimes we've taken that as, okay, I have a singular purpose. But from a faith perspective, it's like, okay, no, my purpose is his purpose. But then beyond that, there's multiple elements and most sub purposes that stream up to that singular purpose, and that is in your family life. That is in your the details of everything. Every part of your life should be in line with that purpose. And ultimately, what you were saying was just like, man, it seems so compartmentalized. I just had it was just all in these different places of things. You touched on something I do think that's a universal wrestle though for people, right? Because there's this faith, right? So let's say you recognize, let's say as you're kind of transitioning, you're in college and you're kind of like, okay, let me do this thing because I need to pay the bills and do this, right? Which there's purpose in that, right? God still uses that as someone, but there's also this piece of like, is it that where's the fine line of having enough faith and then ultimately having just being realistic, quote unquote, and being pragmatic and thoughtful, right? Because in some sense, even though you took the quote unquote pragmatic view to say, I need to build it, I need to make a career, God still, even in that, put you in a position where you were confronted with your gifts and so can you talk a little bit about that tension of faith? Like, do I not have enough faith, or am I actually being wise, right? Yeah, talk to that.
So I struggle with, and I feel like a lot of people struggle with this independent spirit. I can do it myself. I'll make my plans myself, and then I'll bring God in, right? So that was something that I wrestled with, that I had to really lay at the altar, because again, I was operating out of where God wanted me to be. So that was the lesson. And I'm saying this in a sense of even still talking to myself today, a lesson that I had to learn to realize that I knew the word, but I needed to become more one with the word in order to live it out.
What does that mean? Break that down for somebody who kind of doesn't really know what that means. So like, what do you mean to like give a picture of what that meant for your life?
So what that means for my life is really putting the things that I'm reading on Sunday, the scriptures that I'm reading, really putting that to my everyday, whether it's an interaction with a coworker, whether it's an interaction with somebody at the mall. I have to live out what I'm reading. I can't just know all this knowledge and it not come out through me. So to also put it in another sense is it's this idea of, okay, you have to check in with God first and then move. Because when you don't, it's not going to be comfortable. Like it really is going to, and I'll give you an example. So with every job that I've had, I've paid the bills, I've been responsible, I've had just enough, but knowing that I'm the daughter of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, I knew that he didn't want me to just to have enough, right? He didn't die for me to have just enough. I haven't even touched on the fact that each one of those environments that I have been in were extremely toxic, extremely taxing on me emotionally. So I had to get to a point where I said, this is not what he has for me. He doesn't want me to toil so much for so little. I was depressed. I had issues with anxiety and panic attacks. I knew that was not what God had for me, for any of us, right? So yes, it's great to be, I'm not saying don't go to work, but what I am saying, you find yourself in that situation you need to step back and realize, am I operating in his will? And that's what I mean by living the word, operating in his will.
This is, I think, particularly timely because I think this has been actually a real current conversation I've had. Because I think one of the things that, even we talk about even briefly about, I just feel we're a generation that's under duress. And I think particularly in the Black community, I think because of the nature of just systematically how things have turned out, sisters are like often off there on their own if they're not married and they're carrying so much. And a lot of times the indicator that you receive that something is off is from your body, it's from your mind. And we've been taught like this hustle and like push through it. But sometimes we actually don't connect it to God actually speaking, to say God actually created your body, God created your mind. And though there are those who we all struggle with realities of our mind not being the way he designed it to be, right? This mental illness is real and wellness is real. For many people who are in that space, it's like, why can't I see that as God actually inviting me to believe something different? Or how, maybe it's the way I'm seeing my work, or maybe it is my independent spirit and God gave me a community, or I'm disconnected from community. I could actually, there's so many things. There's a conversation is the point. And so I hear that in what you're saying, that, that was a conversation that you had with God. I think we talked about this, and I think you kind of introduced us a bit to kind of your context of how you came up. Right in the church, but how did there was one encounter around just at least doing that major project, but what have been other encounters that you have had from a work perspective that just made you get a sense like this is just not me, like God, what are this is something you're pushing me in versus I just want freedom and I just want to do what I want to do, which sometimes is an extreme that we hear about.
I always had a tugging to do something creative. When I worked on that project, it was never work for me to come up with a concept or to make a decision that was design related. My father always said, you will never work a day in life if what you do you love. So I had things checked off as far as my cable, my lights, my rent, et cetera, that the job was covering, but I wasn't fulfilled. I was empty. That's where, I had a supportive husband, I got to a point again where I'm like, this is not it. This is not it. The other thing that brought me to that point was I wasn't spending time with him. I wasn't praying like I need to, and no, I needed to. I'm if I don't have my quiet time, if I don't to set my day is off. So that's always been my priority. So as I was seeing a shift in me personally, again, I said, I have to get back to what makes me smile. So then I've always been kind of very self-aware. So it was one of those things of, well, what does that look like? What does a passion look like for you? And again, this thing I had to come back to interior design just wouldn't let me go. It would not let me go. Any talk about it or anything just was too exciting. So I said, okay, well, that's it.
I mean, when you talk about that tug, is that sense, it's that feeling that I think people talk about. A lot of times people call it their gut, right? And not actually ascribe that to God speaking to them in those things. I part of me even continue to circle the block on this piece is that, there's so much richness. There's clearly a dance that you have with God around these parts of your life, and it's a conversation. But I think for people who are, I think, on a journey with God, I think a lot of times the so what part is what's missing. Meaning, you grew up in church. For many people, that's the story, right? You grew up in church, so you didn't really know anything else, quote unquote, right? And you've had encounters as a child with God. When was it where, outside of just the realm of how you came up, out of the realm of childhood, where it really became good news? What was it about God? Tell me about a moment, that you had where it was just like, okay, it's not just like, it was like levels, where there was another level that was hit with God to say, okay, this is more than me being obedient. It's more than this is all I know and I love it and I enjoy it. Now I'm in my life, and now this is like, oh, no. there's another level with God. Like, tell me about a story that for you when that a shift happened beyond what you knew growing up.
Ooh, okay, let's try to get through this without tears. So I'll have to say, first and foremost, yes, I grew up in the church. Again, but within my family, religion was accepted, but relationship was foreign. Mm-hmm. And I'll break that down very briefly. When it comes to any relationship, you have to spend time with the person. You have to be intentional about what you do and what you say during that time. So a lot of times I was taught that, church is on Sunday, mm-hmm. but then Monday through Saturday, we got this. I like you said, we hustle, we do it on our own. And that's not to knock how I grew up. But as a child, they say when you're young, like, oh, they won't remember that. Like, they're so young, but children do. Things stick with them. Mm-hmm. And my parents divorced when I was older, but they were emotionally divorced well before that. Mm-hmm. So that rift in my house was felt. So with that rift, the focus of that tension was always there. Mm. So as a child, I don't know what it was, but I remember in just a feeling of I need somebody that's always there. I don't know what love is, but I don't think it looks like this. Mm. Every time I went to the Word, I've been saved since I was 5. Mm-hmm. So I'll say, hearing the Word, I was like, okay, I want that. I would get a feeling of peace. I would get a feeling of calm. I would feel love through the songs and the scriptures. So I just, as a child, got closer and closer to those, because I think there's a few segments of us that do grow up in a certain form of dysfunction within the home. Mm. And so I didn't know that I was dealing with a certain amount of trauma growing up then. Mm-hmm. But in my adulthood, it showed up. Mm-hmm. It showed up like for Jacob when he was thinking that he had to give Joseph a gift. I was operating out of this sense of I always have to perform. Mm-hmm. I always have to bring you something in order for me to be enough. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. God's word tells us, no, he loves us. He gives us grace. He knew our name and knows every hair on our head, even before we were born. So that, as a child, was what I kept gravitating towards. Even though, yes, I grew up in the church, I wasn't taught anything about relationship. And even sometimes with family members was looked at in a way when I did read my Bible outside of Sunday. I was then judged and looked at it a way like, what are you doing? That's like, what are you doing? So encounter for me early on, and that's key. I think a lot of people don't realize that it's not all head knowledge. It's about encounter with God. At an early age is really what kept me rooted, if you will. I'll say that it kept me rooted, so that even though I stray away off the path, I'm always going to come back to, like, it was never an option, even when I missed the mark, to not go back to God.
This piece around performance, I think, is you're touching on like a hornet's nest for people, because I think that's one of those unconscious things. Do you think that as it relates to your journey, even around, your work and your vision that you feel God has given you around your interior design, was it also a fear that because this is off the beaten trail, I would not be validated? I would not be, I would not receive the, you did a good job. It's so amorphous, right? And at least with this job, I get paid, right? I still get something that affirm. Did that play any role in kind of just your tension of saying, yo, I'm doing this because I'm doing something, I'm getting something from it. This, I don't know what I'm going to get from it. So maybe that's not where God is.
Let me tell you, I struggled with this for years. And for anyone that struggles with this, I get it. Because, I mean, if you just think about from an academia standpoint, you do good, you get good grades, someone gives you a letter grade, you get a star, and even in social media realm, you know, everyone wanting to post their wins, this, and that, and get the right angle and all this. Like that is the culture that we are exposed to at an early age, and that is the culture that we see when we scroll on our timelines. So I absolutely struggled with that, and that is the beauty of also having a relationship with God. He showed that to me, that ugly side that I had to let go. And that's the thing I love about God, because he is a father. Like he is a father to all of us. And I didn't see that blind spot, to be completely honest. He showed that to me, like you need to go back and know who I say you are. It's not about what you can do. It's not about what you can bring to the table, because that's not how I see you. And I think that is, for me, was so freeing, because it makes you realize, like, wow, he's a father that truly loves me for who I am, even when I get it wrong.
Could you make it real? Like, so I think because this is so keen, this is so common, you know, like when you said he showed you, show us, like, when did you get that moment when you felt like God was like showing you this about yourself?
So that's so interesting, because God really made it plain. He showed it through a friend of mine. And God can do that sometimes. Like some people will say, I can't hear from God. I can't hear from God. What do I need to do? Sometimes he is showing and there's a blind spot. And sometimes he has to knock us over the head with a friend telling us, like, look. And that's exactly what happened. I had a friend straight up tell me, Anita, you don't stop hiding behind your humor. I did that a lot. I would hide. Everyone always, oh, she's so funny, and she's so, like, I would hide behind my humor. And he said, stop hiding behind, like, just be yourself. And in that moment of him saying, just be yourself, I was stuck. I was like, well, what does that look like if I'm not bringing my talents, I'm not bringing my humor, then who am I? So that was the self-check that God did, speaking through that friend. And for me to then have to go back to my prayer corner and do the work to say, okay, I don't have it together. I thought I did, and I don't. And that's something else with performance. It's not about having it together.
Go ahead.
It's a journey.
This is I think this is huge, because I think in these times, right, and you know, we've been here before, but and I think people have encountered things that have made them ask themselves, who am I? Right? I think with the public health crisis and the like, jobs have been taken, you know, your rhythm is different, the things that you've come to know yourself as, the you know, where you've rooted all your identity around is just like, I am this, I work at this place, or I'm known to this, or it comes crashing down. And I think in the similar way that your friend asked you, and you had to kind of reckon with, if I'm not currying favor, who am I? Will I still be will they still want to be around me? Am I worthy? Am I important? Who am I? I think a lot of people are asking this question. I think this is a question for professionals. When you encounter the valleys in your journey, when you lose that job, when something drastic happens, or when your role shifts, when you can't, in a season of life, you cannot be the top performer because you have responsibilities at home. It's like, who am I? Am I just this person, or am I more than that? And so I just think that is so important. I want to keep the foot on the gas a bit on this part of it, because as we said, that there's more to you similarly, right? You know, being a wife and being a mother, and, you know, having your children, and, like, you know, having so many beautiful children. I think sometimes the question is just like, how does God guide you tangibly to be able to pour and give? Because one of the things I always say is that, like, for many people who don't have the support or not, it's not sustainable, right? Something's gonna give, right? Either it's like a relationship with God, your relationship with your spouse. Like, so how does God tangibly help you stay in rhythm with him in a way that you could pour out in a sustainable way?
Oh, yes, the Holy Spirit. He has truly been my helper. And it starts with or without kids, even if you just want to go back to being a wife. Mm-hmm. It starts with expectation. I think the first thing the Holy Spirit spoke to me and said was, you'll need help. You'll need help with or without kids. So I am not afraid to say that I rely heavily on my village. I grew up, seeing how things were with my mom and seeing how much she did in her own strength, especially within the Black family, right? Like Big Mama or whoever, she got it, right? Like, and seeing how that wore on her and making a decision before I became a wife that I know I'm going to need help. I want to have a conversation. What that looked like is having a conversation with my now husband to say what marriage would look like for us, not based off of what we've heard or seen or not seen, what it looks like for us. First thing. Second thing, with kids, same thing. I'm not afraid either to say that some days I will give attention 100% to cooking something, and other days I'm doing takeout. Some days I will need to call a babysitter so that I can take a call or a meeting with a client, and other days, so this expectation was set early on, help me not to then put all this pressure on ourselves. And I think that's something that a lot of us do, is we think that we have to, I got it. Like, we think we have to get it. And God constantly would tell me, I'm here to help. So lean into what that help will look like.
Yo, this is helpful, for lack of a better word, because I think when people hear about God, and even for those who, in a relationship and have a relationship with God, you think that God is just like only storm clouds and lightning bolts. And he can be that. He could be anything, right? But God often is in the community around us, in the resources we have, in the time. He's in all of those things. And he's saying, look, I'm available to help you, but because of love, I allow you to choose. Sometimes, in some cases, I intervene, but in a lot of cases, I want to grow your heart for love. So I want you to grow your ability to rely upon people. So I'm going to put people around. And so I'm just hoping that someone who's hearing this and seeing this recognizes, like, yo, like, God, it should not destroy you to do the things of God, right? There was one who had to do the thing of God, and it destroyed him for us. But we don't need to do that again. It's finished. So I think there's so much wisdom in what you're saying and in doing these things. I have to ask this piece, right? Because I think around details, even as we're kind of coming to close, there's this, I always say God is in the details. This has been a saying I've always said, because when people read even the Old Testament, and talking about Leviticus and the Exodus, and they're talking about just like the temple in Exodus, and people looking at all this like 5 cubits high and this cubit high, and people get lost. They're like, oh, this is too much. Right? I don't get it. But in that, it was just like, think about that. That's the same God who loves you. It's the same God who's in charge of your life. The God who they required that much detail just because of who he is and how perfect he is. How much more would he be in the details of your life? When you think about design, just your design schema, thesis, how does your faith pour into that? Or does it? Not really. It's just like God allows me, or like, how does that actually, when you're actually designing, it informs the designs that you actually pursue? Like what's that conversation of anything? I love to get in creatives' head. So like, just what does that look like?
So it looks like 2 things. One, whatever project or anything I'm working on, I always give it to God first. Like, what is the direction you want me to do. And then what that looks like is just going in prayer and really just saying, God, I recognize this gift that I have is from you. So I'm coming to you to see how I can be my best. That's the first thing. God is a perspective. God is a great creator, right? So when it comes to creatives, he is the ultimate creator. So everything that we have that we think is our own idea is actually because of him.
I love that. So you said two parts. So you said the first part was just kind of like going to God because he's the greatest creator of all time, of course, right? But is there another piece beyond that? Like from when you go at that stage, is there from even a colors or this like that, or not really?
I would honestly have to say, in knowing that he's our creator, he touches and creates everything, then I go to the things that ignite excitement in me. So that is colors, that is things from nature, and just appreciating those details, if you will, those small moments, those small levels of excitement, and thinking about, because I think, it's a part of that whole like stop to smell the roses, right? Like I think we move so fast, and people will say, "Oh, you're a designer. Where do you find your inspiration?" And for many designers, we will say everywhere, and we really mean that. Like there's not some magical, like we really pay attention to everything and really take, so this color, and I can put this on a pillow or that, and put this on a wall, and really create this space. And people are like, "Oh, I thought like this is, where did you get this idea?" And the ideas are all around us.
This is, I think I want people who's listening and watching just like sometimes I always attempt when I'm around my creative friends, and sometimes I'm just like to go into the Pandora's box, so to speak, knowing that it's nearly impossible to go, but I try, right? But there's also another part of it to say, sometimes I think even in all of our work, I think sometimes we don't accept enough about God, the God of mystery. And the idea that there are people, I don't, there's another term I used to use, but it's not necessarily the best term. There's almost like a beautiful mind piece where think about how vulnerable you have to be, where you can't move until you hear something. Actually, your inspiration is not a formula. You can't go back. It's like, actually, God will give it to me. Actually, he will give me that. And life is R&D, research and development, me living my life and me taking in everything that he's doing. And in that way, he's speaking to me. And then through what talent he's put in me, that is actually the stovetop or furnace by which it gets developed. And so I think that we don't leave enough mystery, even for people, even though there is true formal training. And so that was my little swing at that joke a bit. But my sister, this is such a rich conversation around the reality of just, how God still is like, there's so much we don't find God, God finds us. And so even in the work that you're doing, that God still showed up to say, there's something inside of you that needs to be exercised because there's a work that I have to do. What do you have coming ahead? Like what's ahead? How do people come alongside you and support you? What's going on, Anita? How can we support?
Yes, actually, funny enough, I have a rebranding going on right now.
Okay.
So Plus Details is a blog. It's just that. And from that and growing my Instagram all last year, I've really had an influx of client work. A lot of people are at home. They're looking at their spaces and they're pinging me for help. So I'm going to transition to a studio. So a rebranding will be coming. The blog will still be there, but it'll be a subset of the studio itself, which is PLD Design Studio, where I will be operating as the owner and designer for residential and commercial projects.
Oh, Sook, this is dope. We're excited. I'm excited. When want to get to look out for that, or right now, but they can ping you now. So like, how do they connect with you? That's the website piece. How do they connect with you online? And then when do they look out for the rebrand and all that? When do they get to look out for that?
Yes, all handles on Instagram, Facebook, are at Pretty Loves Details. for both, details plural, working on stepping out on my faith and seeing where God can take me, which is always up because we always win with God.
You can't end any better than that. My sister, thank you for just sharing your journey and sharing your stories with God. I'm thankful for the work that you do, partial for good reason. Thank you again, my sister, and look forward to speaking with you and to continue to support you in all that God has you doing.